There are countless books, white papers, blog posts, workshops, and TED Talks about building a community, all offering complex models and guidelines. A strong and cohesive community is pretty simple. It's just bringing together people with similar interests and challenges to learn, connect, and serve for the good of themselves and others. Communities that make a difference understand the chances one gives are just as important as the chances one takes. That's why CEO.com clubs exist, to give and take chances on ourselves and others. CEO.com clubs are exclusive, invite-only communities that connect visionary leaders based on specific challenges, industry focus, and leadership goals. We do this in various ways, including providing a private social network for community members only, highly curated leadership events, access to our member directory, and, well, you get the idea. You can learn all about the array of benefits at ceo.com/clubs. More than anything, what CEO.com clubs uniquely do better than anyone else is bringing leaders with similar interests and challenges together to ask each other the following two questions. How can I help you? And how can we give a chance to someone else? If you're a leader in a specific industry who wants to give and take chances on yourself and others, CEO.com has a club for you. Life is more gratifying and full of purpose when you become someone who gives as many chances as you take.
Have you ever read Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl? The lesson that I took away from that book is effectively that, you can't control your circumstances, but it's inalienable to you to choose how you respond to your environment. And that idea of being a high agency human who does not make excuses, but rather says, I take responsibility for how things unfolded. That is a very, very powerful be in the world.
Mike, thank you so much for coming on the show. You are the CEO of Brightwave, the founder of that company. You have a long and rich history in artificial intelligence, which is the topic of the day and year and probably next decade and the decades to come.
Millennium, yes.
Yeah. Tell us about Brightwave and how you got there.
Excellent. Yeah, of course. So Brightwave is an investment research platform that uses AI to expand the limits of human cognition. So if you think about the job of an active asset manager, it's to know something about the market that nobody else has seen to identify a mispriced asset. And our view is that it's not clear that is a task that's well suited to human intellect or attention span. When you think about the body of material that is relevant to an investment decision, to include SEC filings, earnings call transcripts, sell-side analysis, breaking news, content from the public internet, podcast transcripts, the congressional record, the volume of relevant information exceeds what a person is able to keep in mind simultaneously. And we've built a system that is able to connect the dots across huge bodies of content to accelerate investment research workflows. So a lot of that just bread and butter, fact-finding, question answering, but also up-levels human analytical capabilities by identifying fact patterns across many, many different documents that support an investment decision. So finance professionals are able to accelerate workflows and make decisions with greater conviction and insight.
What do you do when everybody's using Brightwave and it's just this incredible, anybody can day trade and they're all making the correct decision? Do you ever think about that? I mean, that's just the first thing. I mean, that's going to take forever, but it's really interesting. If everybody starts using this technology, I guess you can put different qualifiers and things like that. But what if everybody just wins all their trades? That's, I guess.
Yeah. So this actually came up a lot when we were pitching the company originally. I think if we live in a world where Brightwave has created a perfectly efficient market, that's a very different world that we will inhabit than from the one we inhabit. But I think more sort of pragmatically, there is always going to be information that has not been digitized, and there's always going to be intelligence that these models do not have access to. And so we've created a system that centers the analyst and the researcher in the decision-making process. And we allow a human to direct the attention of this very powerful system. But language models and AI technology are not a replacement for human judgment. And so we see that taste-making process. That's an interesting fact. I want to know more about. You should run that. I want to know more about that. You should run that down for me. I think that is where you're going to get very, very heterogeneous behaviors from different teams that have different theses, have different views on macro global. Like it's just still very much a taste-making process. I would make the comparison to accountants in the 70s. So VisiCalc, the first computational spreadsheet, was released in 1979. And if you were to speak with an accountant in 1978 and say, "What's your job?" they would say, I run the numbers. I'm the numbers guy. I write it out on a piece of paper in a grid, and it's cognitively demanding. It's time intensive, and it's important to the business. It's a real important job. And now nobody wants to do that work. And it's because it's not that we no longer have a finance function. It's rather that the sophistication of the analysis that we can bring to bear on a problem is just much expanded. And I think that we're seeing a similar moment for qualitative and language-oriented reasoning.
Yeah, that is super interesting. What made you see like the opportunity here? Because you worked for incredible companies. You've had an incredible career in this. You have a PhD from Indiana University on complexity science. I mean, like you have a lot of background here. What made you decide like, all right, I'm going all in on Brightwave? And can you just kind of go a little bit deeper on like the opportunity that exists there in the investing space?
Yeah, thanks for a thoughtful question. I have been fortunate to work in environments where I've had access to data sets that describe the true structure of society. So my PhD dealt with the structure of how information spreads through very large groups of people on Twitter. We had a very early access to the Twitter data set. And I worked at LinkedIn, where we had this high resolution graph, this network structure describing the global economy, who works where and what skills do they have and where are they located. And at Workday and SkipFlag, a previous startup, just have had a front row seat to data sets that describe the systems that govern the course of our lives. The privilege of sort of seeing the statistical reality. You think about like traffic or the economy or pandemics and how these processes unfold. Climate is a good example. It is something that is larger than ourselves, but that has a material impact on our lives and that has real quantitative mathematical structure, but we can't see it. And it's only in the past 25 years that the computational technologies have made those systems studyable even. And with language models, so prior to founding Brightwave, I was at Databricks, where I created one of the first language models to demonstrate that open source technologies could exhibit the kinds of behaviors we've come to expect from ChatGPT. And that work in language model engineering really helped me understand how you look at the glide path for this technology. It is expanding in its ability to process large volumes of information simultaneously. And you connect that fact with regards to speed and volume of content processing to the reality that there are systems that govern our lives that we can't see, and the markets being kind of the ultimate manifestation of those systems. And it seems like a very natural decision to build a technology that accelerates that process.
I am fascinated by the debate between open source and closed source in AI. And you got like Zuckerberg on the one end, who is like all in on open source, which is really fascinating because that seems like a kind of a new thing for Zuck. And then you've got Sam Altman, who runs OpenAI, but it's not actually open; it's closed AI.
Sure.
What is your take on the difference between these different paths in AI, and which one do you think eventually kind of wins out? Or do they both? I mean, in software, they both exist, obviously. So maybe they.
So I think on what Facebook is doing, I think the axiom is commoditize your complement. And so many of the things that they do, when you think about newsfeed, content generation, or chat, this sort of language being the substrate that Facebook operates on, in addition to images, all of that is better and more usable with something like language models. And so being the de facto standard for open source language models and having a robust developer ecosystem around their technology makes their business run more effectively and efficiently. Like you think of digital avatars as they move into VR and AR. Those are all powered by language models. And so I do not think it is pure generosity of spirit that leads to this decision. But, I think contrast with some of the commercial offerings or these closed source models, not for nothing, running a 400 billion parameter model like Llama 3 405B which is their largest and sort of most powerful model from Meta. There's a fair amount of engineering overhead associated with that, and there's some comparability among the current frontier models, whether it's from Anthropic or OpenAI or Meta. But goodness, it is convenient not to have to run it all yourself. And so I think it's really about kind of more just classical trade-off management. And so I think it's just choose the right tool for the job is the approach that we take, and also recommend that our customers take.
And again, this is probably like the question of the millennia, which is, what is the future of AI? How do you see this playing out? As you think about over the next 5 to 10 years, I mean, what is this thing going to be capable of? And I know that's hard to answer, but just give us kind of your broad strokes of that.
I think I can say that in the next several months and years, we're going to see an increase in what would be described as agentic tool use. So right now, these models, it's kind of out of the box. You get ask a question, get a response, but there's not a lot of planning work that goes into that. And so like if you ask it to achieve a complex goal, it can often get tripped up. And so at Brightwave, what we're building towards are systems that unfold a sequence of decisions like an analyst would make in pursuing an investment thesis that allow us to control the direction of how the model makes decisions so it doesn't get caught in factual misstatements or running down dead ends, or if it runs down a dead end, it bails on it as quickly as possible. And I think that right now the real product form factor has been chat. That is what most people think of these systems as doing. And we're seeing a move towards more asynchronous, longer running, more intensive workloads. Whether that's, hey, I'm going to give you 7 to 9 minutes to write a fairly sophisticated piece of software and with complex structure, for example, or I want you to take time to assess, critique, refine this thesis. And then when you have considered all of the relevant factors, report back to me with a comprehensive brief on the topic, rather than having me sort of at every turn pushing you to say, answer this question, answer this question, answer this question. And that agentic behavior where it's self-directed, that has access to tools like market intelligence, like database lookups, like calculation capabilities. I think that's the future of this technology in the 6 to 12 month time period. What's going to happen in 5 years is, I wouldn't even know to speculate.
We may all just be unemployed and like serving the robots at that point. Which
that is actually where I do disagree. I think that the parallel to think about the amount. Here's a concrete example. We're going to a big conference. We're looking at the attendee list. Historically, you would have had to sort that attendee list into like, what are the investing strategies of all of these individuals who are attending. You would have done that by hand, and it would have required. There was no alternative to a person doing it. Now you can have a system do that, and it would have taken 3 hours, and now it takes a matter of minutes. I think there's a fair amount of work in our professional lives that we don't notice how tedious it is because it's all we've ever known. And I like to think that as these technologies get more sophisticated, we will be freed to focus on the things that are enjoyable and actually value add and require the most of what we have to offer rather than the tedium, similar to those accountants in the 70s.
Yeah, I definitely think that's right. This is kind of a question like where we began, but going a little bit deeper. Like, what is the future of trading platforms in the age of AI? Like, what does a Charles Schwab, for example, think of what Brightwave is doing?
Well, I wouldn't be able to comment on any individual platform, but I think that what you can say is that retail trading, I think is above 30% of total transaction volume. As of last year. And as with all things, there's this democratization of technology where you used to have to book a travel agent, and now everybody can plan incredible trips. And historically, it used to have like a broker who you would call to place a trade. And the first wave was, now we have democratized access to, low cost trade execution. I think in the near future, we will see individuals having excellent access to the kinds of information that historically has been the exclusive purview of extremely well-capitalized firms, and not just information, but technology to enhance decision-making, where if you have a thing that you believe about the world, whether it's the future of drones or if it's how Africa is on the rise or the political situation in South America, and you just want to articulate that with, put your money where your mouth is, I think that individuals will be able to do that in a way that goes far beyond just tilting at windmills.
What do you make of the rise of retail trading? Like, obviously, one of the reasons why it's happening, you just explained, like the advances in technology, and that's only going to get better. And the amount of resources and knowledge and information that retail investors is only going to get greater, right? And that gap between retail versus, kind of, more accredited investors is only going to get smaller and smaller. But is there anything else to it? Like, what else would, like, the GameStop thing doesn't seem like it was that, or like these various things. Like, was there more to like why this might be happening?
It's not. I'm a fairly uninteresting investor. I bet on the progress of technology very secularly, and it's so I just want to represent faithfully sort of my areas of expertise. Candidly, I think part of it is probably a sense of disillusionment with the American bargain, at least with domestically, and a feeling that like, geez, I've got to be trying something. I want a piece of the action. And I think that is, I think, a factor here. I think you saw that in crypto as well, where people were just trying something and trying to get ahead through any means possible. Now, is this the right way to manifest that urge or instinct? That's kind of an open question. I would, again, above my pay grade. So I think there's the democratization of the tools, but I think there's also this sense that like it is harder to get ahead in American society now than it was when I was a kid. And I think people are responding to that. And whether this is the correct response to that fact is like unclear. But I would say that's probably a cofactor. What do you think?
Yeah. I don't. Yeah, I think that's. I mean, if as you see like the distrust in all institutions go down, it makes a lot of sense that kind of the rebellion would come up at that same time, right? And so I think that's a good piece of it. And yeah, I think the disillusionment is a great way to describe what's happening there. I want to ask you this as CEO of Brightwave. What does a typical day look like for you?
I mean, it is, goodness gracious, it is all over the map. We move very, very quickly. We are extremely responsive to feedback from our users. And so it's a mix between product design, just reviewing user interface. I mean, the design problem we're solving is how do you reveal the thought process of something that's considered 10,000 pages of text to a person in a way that's useful and understandable. It's not a design problem anybody has ever solved before. So we are at the forefront of user experience and user interaction design, not a subject I have classical training in. But likewise, marketing and sales. I mean, we are constantly thinking about how to cut through and deliver our message in a people are so saturated. Goodness, I get dozens of AI generated sales outreach emails in a week where it, clearly a model has read something from our website and generated sales collateral that, and it's how do you communicate your message in that environment? I think there are problems that we think about. So there's a lot of commercial activity. There's a lot of product design activity, but the bread and butter of the work is fundamental systems engineering and machine learning engineering, where we are creating a system that solves a very, very complex problem in a way that has never before been possible. And one of the advantages that Brightwave has relative to some of our competitive set is that it's founded and staffed by extremely accomplished technical minds. And how do you direct in a reliable and repeatable way the decision-making process of this agentic research assistant is effectively an open research problem. And so a lot of the work is looking at the numbers, understanding the limits of the technology, and designing algorithms that allow us to accomplish our goals.
What do you read? What reading recommendations would you have for us?
You mean technical nonfiction?
Just general. In general, like what do you read?
That's a great question. I would say that I'll give you kind of a personal answer. I read, my inclination is always to read non-technical work, or rather is always to read non-technical nonfiction. And I have to overcome that urge because you can't be running at 120% all the time. And so lately I've been reading the Expanse sci-fi series. And,
That's
I
great.
actually, when we were doing the work with Dolly, which was the language model we created at Databricks, I reread Neuromancer and Snow Crash, which are sort of both, classics of the cyberpunk AI gone wild genre. And things like this.
I like that. I wonder, like, I've been thinking about this a lot lately, and I wonder what your take would be on it as like a CEO and a founder and somebody who's building a
Hmm.
company. Like, I live in Utah. We have this
Yeah,
kind of really strong tech
beautiful
and
state.
startup
I'm from
community here.
Arizona.
Oh, thank you. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. We got to get you up here for Silicon Slopes Summit in January.
love it.
But so I'm here, and like we really have like this mental health crisis in our community that I'm seeing. It's not unique to Utah, where just like how like entrepreneurship is so lonely, how being a CEO can be lonely at times. I just wonder, like, how do you work through that? Like, or do you have any like tips or tricks or things that you do to kind of stay balanced?
For loneliness in particular.
That and just like general, mental health. It seems like it's
Yeah.
degrading a little bit. And that's not a unique thing to entrepreneurship, or it's just
Yeah,
in general.
sure. That's a great question. I really think that the work that you do to understand where you stand, if you have a foundation that you believe in, like all other decisions are made much clearer. And, for me, it's relationships, natural beauty, and personal growth. And so, constantly reflecting on how am I investing my time? How does it connect to the things that I want to achieve in my life in a wraparound sense? It helps me feel like the decisions I'm making are lining up with the larger objectives. I would say additionally, just my family is a great source of strength and the reservoir from which I draw my sense of purpose in the world, candidly. And so I think the last thing I'll say on this is, I said relationships is kind of that first pillar. Having a community of men in my life where I am candid and like vulnerable and like friends who I can really like break it down with and who understand. I think all of this circles around the natural world and human connection, which is so different. And I think that is the tonic, that is the salve for these modern times, is not forgetting the archetypal rewards that are like baked into us at a neurological level. And like no phone is going to replace that circuitry.
Yeah. Do you think, like, as AI accelerates and we can do more and more on our own and all,
Hmm.
like don't you think human connection becomes even more valuable, not less? Like I,
Yes.
I see that as becoming the gatherings and this, because we're very like social animals as human
Yeah.
beings. Don't you see like human connection as like being like that's going to be even more valuable in the future?
Absolutely. And when I think about the unlock when it comes to our professional lives, where are we connecting? How are we connecting? How are we investing our time so that it's not the rote tedium that is automatable, but is instead that interpersonal work that, business deals will still always be relationship driven. And I think those are, to the extent people have more time to spend with their family and friends, to the extent that they're able to focus on the professional relationships that matter. I think, the technology is an unlock in that dimension.
How do you think about creating and defining and building a culture inside of your company?
So, three core values at Brightwave: ownership, humility, and craft. And I can speak to each of them in turn. So, ownership is this idea that, have you ever read Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah. So, Holocaust survivor reflecting on what is it that allowed some people to endure the horrors of the Holocaust. And the lesson that I took away from that book is effectively that, you can't control your circumstances, but it's inalienable to you to choose how you respond to your environment. And that idea of being a high agency human who does not make excuses, but rather says, I take responsibility for how things unfolded. That is a very, very powerful be in the world. Humility, kind of born out of this scientific method, but also just as a principle, like there's so little that we actually know about the world and about what other people think and about what's actually going on. And it's a real source of strength to recognize that and just like accept that you are just this mote of dust floating through space. And there's a lyric from a rap group I really like, Run the Jewels, which is roughly, You can't crush me, I'm dirt. And it's just like a real powerful, like, what are you going to do? Like, and there's this, if I'm wrong and you and I disagree about something, it's probably because you have information I need to get. And so my job should be to elicit, what are you seeing that I'm missing? Because I believe you're a reasonable person, as a default. And that often leads to a better outcomes because you're more interested in doing the right thing rather than being right. And so that final piece is just craftsmanship, which is the pride of work that accompanies meticulousness and just really focusing on the details. And technically, this is extremely important in the sense that if you have imagine you have a mechanical system that has a joint with a little bit of play in it, you may not notice that when there's only one. But if there are 8 connections in serial, now you suddenly have a lot of play in that system. And with language models, there's so many places that the system can exhibit a little bit of play. And so being able to rigorously and methodically execute a technical agenda and building things right the first time, even if it takes a little longer, allows us to move faster in the limit. And so ownership and humility and craft are 3 of the core values for our teams.
Yeah, ownership is a great one. I don't know that I really hear that one very much as a value.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. I think
Yeah.
that's kind of fascinating. How do you stay motivated? Like, just like motivated to keep, I mean, that actually isn't a mental health question. It's like, how do you stay motivated?
So a couple things. These are great questions, by the way. I appreciate it. So I am a very relationally driven person. I think that the sense that I am coming into a workplace, we work in person 5 days a week. I'm coming into a workplace surrounded by people who are intense, who are extremely capable. We've got folks from Meta and Instagram and UBS and McKinsey and Wharton. It's just a stacked bench where it's like I have to earn the respect and trust and time of the people around me all the time. And I find that extremely energizing to just be surrounded by people who cause me to achieve more. And additionally, the problem we're solving is just intrinsically interesting, no less than understanding the true structure of the global economy with artificial intelligence.
Yeah.
Boy, howdy, if that's not enough to keep you busy, I don't know what is. And so I just really enjoyed that, the scope of the problem that we are solving. And for whatever reason, I find the day-to-day and the technical details, but also the commercial details just very, very interesting.
What made you decide to go all in person 5 days a week versus, a lot of people are doing the hybrid versus the work from home? Like, what went into that decision?
So it's actually our stated policy is 3 days a week. It's just the pleasure of being around great people, So it was not a decision. It's just sort of it has happened organically. It's just I mean listen, when you're at a big company and like whether you're there or not doesn't matter that much. People notice that whether or not they can articulate it, they feel it. And so I think a lot of the like, why am I commuting? There's a direct through line to like, if I wasn't here, it wouldn't really matter that much. But at a startup, it matters. And like and we have offices in New York and Boulder, and we have a team in California. We'll open an office in California. But so there's a remote culture, but I don't know what the model for it would be because we're not remote, centered around these hubs. And it's probably just going to be those 3 sites. It's not going to be 12 different locations. So being together in person, but, understanding that we can work remotely and do work remotely. I think it's a new way of working.
2 more questions for you.
Sure.
How are you thinking about 2025? Obviously, we have an election coming up here in the United States very soon.
Yep.
Which is an interesting thing because CEOs nowadays are being asked to comment on things that have nothing to do with their companies or what they're focused on. I'm not asking you to comment or like don't tell us who you're voting for or anything.
Sure.
But I just like, how are you thinking about how that shakes out and going into 2025?
Capital efficiency, just having enough cash on hand to weather whatever may come. Whatever regulatory regime, whatever geopolitical uncertainties, I think just, I wouldn't call it a fortress balance sheet, but you want to have enough money to, this money is fundamentally like optionality. And so being extremely judicious with how you spend and preserving optionality in a period of a change, I think is always good policy.
Yeah. Finally, we end every interview with the same question, and that is at CEO.com, we believe the chances one gives is just as important as the chances one takes. When you hear that, who gave you a chance to get you to where you are today?
Who gave me a chance? It's a great question. There's so many people. I think that I would say that I paused for a moment there because there are so many people that come to mind. I would say that I will thank our investors. This is not a twee answer either. Their decibel is, their slogan is believe in technical founders and invest early. And I can't believe I'm thanking our investors and sort of recognizing them, but I actually feel this way. They are people who make early bets on teams just on the basis of sort of conviction in the absence of other data, really. We set out to raise capital, and we met them, and it was just we hit it off immediately, and they just got long on what we were doing very assertively and very, very confidently. And I think that is it just created an opening for us to do so. We built something. We knew it was going to happen. But having investors who sort of share the enthusiasm and the vision and just kind of like believe, I think, has created the opportunity for all of this to exist.
Who are your investors? If you want to shout them out, just so other entrepreneurs know.
Decibel, Moonfire, and one of the largest asset managers in the world.
Mike, thank you so much for coming on. Seriously, congratulations on everything you're doing. Man, what an opportunity and a category you're going after. So best of luck with everything.
Appreciate it, Clint. This was truly a pleasure.
Thanks, man.
Take care, sir.